Welcome to Amateur Radio Roundtable. Sorry, folks, we had a little trouble there on startup. Ted got his transmitter up, but I was having trouble with the webcast here. I think we're on, so somebody let me know if you're seeing us out there. But anyway, welcome again to Amateur Radio Roundtable. Today is Tuesday, June the 9th, 2015. And I'm Tom Medlin, W5KUB, and I'm with our co-host Ted Randall WB8PUM. We thank you for joining us tonight.
And we've got a special guest tonight.
We do have
Bill Morine N2COP. And you need to introduce him and give all these credentials and everything, because my computer screen doesn't go all the way to the floor. So,
well, I tell you, Ted, it almost needs to go to the floor. But tonight, our guest, we got a special guest, Bill Morine N2COP. He's from Wilmington, Connecticut. He's the Vice Director of ARL's Roanoke Division. He was ARL North Carolina Section Manager from 2010 to 2014. He also served on the ARL's National Public Relations Committee for 12 years. He's the 2001 recipient of ARL's Philip J. McGann Award for Public Relations, and he's the winner of the 2014 Roanoke Division Service Award. Now, here's where we get into some detail. He was first licensed in 1970 as WN1NOP when he was up in Massachusetts. He later changed his call down in Virginia as WD4NZF. And then again in New Jersey, he was WB2ZHS. But he became N2COP in 1981 when he moved to North Carolina. And he kept his N2 call. Bill's active in Boy Scouts of America. He served on the staff of the station K2BSA and the 2001 and 2005 National Jamborees. He's helped over 2,000 Boy Scouts earn their radio merit badges, and he has assisted over 300 youth to earn their license. Bill's a graduate of Tufts University and the Johns Hopkins University School of Advanced International Studies. So, welcome, Bill. How are you tonight?
Tom and Ted and everybody out there watching the video stream and listening on wtww, it is great to be here joining you this evening. Thanks for inviting me as a guest.
Well, you're very welcome, and I'm glad that we were able to get you on here tonight. You sound like a very busy guy.
Well, part of that is image. It's a great opportunity to get out, Tom, and talk to all sorts of people. Now, I'd be remiss, Tom, if I didn't jump in here up front and just say that less than a month ago, when I saw you at the Dayton Hamvention in Dayton, Ohio, I didn't have the opportunity to congratulate you there, so I'm going to congratulate you tonight with all your viewers and listeners, and say it was a real pleasure to see you to get a Special Achievement Award from the Dayton Amateur Radio Association for your superb work you've done over the years in publicizing Dayton Hamvention. Congratulations.
Well, I want to thank you for mentioning that. Our viewers out there are what makes this thing possible. That made the award possible there, and the work that we're doing trying to get the word out about ham radio there. And we've been so blessed to have Ted Randall come on board with us here and partner with us and help us expand the show into shortwave. So, hey, let's just jump into your story real quick. When did you get about what age were you when you got your ham license, and how did you get interested in ham radio?
Well, it's a great beginning. I got interested in 1963. I'll come right out and tell you, I'm 63 years old right now. I was in high school, and I grew up in a town outside Boston that was 5 miles long, 3 miles wide, and there was no school bus service. No matter where you went to school in town, you had to walk, and there were some long walks there. In fact, it was a mile and a half to we used to call it junior high in those days. And one of the kids who lived on the way home, one day said to me, "I'm going up to my shack to talk to my dad." And I thought, well, that's strange. What does he mean by that? And he go, "Well, where's your dad?" And he said, "Well, he's on a ship out at sea." And I said, "Well, how are you going to talk to him?" He said, "Well, I'm going to talk to him by ham radio." And that was my buddy Tom Hale, who now lives on Cape Cod, Massachusetts, KB1, can't remember his suffix right now. And he's the one that got me interested. So many years went by, did some shortwave listening, And finally, and this is a kind of a fun story, in the summer of 1970, the town next to me, as I was growing up, was Cambridge, Massachusetts, home of Harvard University and MIT. And MIT's radio station, W1MX, was offering a novice training class. So a buddy of mine and I went down for 6 weeks and took the training, and then went to the FCC office in Boston on the 16th floor of the Custom House building. And took our exam. Anybody who's old enough to remember what it was like to take an exam at the FCC, it was a little nerve-wracking. By the way, Tom, that building is now a Marriott hotel, and I told my wife that on my bucket list, I want to have a room on the 16th floor and sleep where I took my initial ham radio exam.
Well, I'll tell you, I had a similar experience. I took my test in Memphis, Tennessee at 16. You had to go to the FCC in those days to take your test. So I know what you went through there. Hey, and my town was a pretty big town too. It had 900 people in it, and it was a uphill walk both directions to school and back.
Yeah, so that's a little bit of my background, and a lot of people say to me, is the call N2COP a vanity call? And it is not. It was original issue in 1981 for an upgrade from technician to general, and I love the call. I know there are a lot of, over the years, I've met a lot of law enforcement officials from the states of New York and New Jersey, and I had one actually outright say to me, was I losing interest in the hobby, or was I terminally ill? And I just, I was a little surprised at his brashness, but he was from the big city, and I informed him that I'm alive, I'm well, I'm healthy, and I'm active. So it's a good call, and I'm going to keep it. And I don't pretend to be in law enforcement, but I will tell you that ever since I put the call sign on my license plate in the back of the car, I have not had a speeding ticket. And let's knock on wood that continues.
Oh, well, hey, I need to get me a license like that. Yeah. Oh, man.
Yeah.
Well, look, hey, let's jump into a few things here, man. We got a lot to talk about tonight.
What's on
hey,
your plate?
Ted,
I
you
got
know,
a couple of shout-outs tonight too. I got to do.
Okay, and Ted, you know Bill, so jump in there if you know something secret about Bill that we need to bring up here.
Alrighty, I'm currently working on the audio. We've lost the feed 2 or 3 times here, so I don't know.
Okay.
And so I'm working on that. I'll be back shortly.
Okay,
hopefully.
very good, Ted. Well, thank you, Ted.
And while we're waiting for Ted to get back, let me brag on Ted for a second, too. Ted is a past winner of the Bill Leonard Award of ARL, which goes annually to a journalist in, there's actually 3 Leonard Awards per year, one for video or television, one for radio or podcasting, and one for print or text. And Ted is a past radio audio recipient of the Bill Leonard Award. So congratulations to him.
Well, hey, I didn't know that. Thank you for bringing that up here. Ted doesn't talk about stuff like that.
You guys are too modest, and you need to brag a little bit about yourself some more, because you do valuable service and to the ham radio community. But let's get on it, Tom. We got a lot to cover. It's June. You know what June means? I'm going to stand up, and those who are watching the video feed will see this. It is Field Day, and I'm wearing my 2015 Field Day T-shirt. I'm doing that. I've been doing that for about a month now to get people in the mood for Field Day, which is, of course, coming up on Saturday, June 27th and Sunday, June 28th.
Okay, 27th and 28th. I'm going to try to take in some of the field days out there. I think we're going to probably not be live, but we're going to do some recording, and then we'll try to have a Tuesday show about it.
It's a great opportunity. It's one of my favorite days in ham radio every year, when some 1,500 stations throughout the United States and Canada get on the air simultaneously, and we have an estimated 35,000 participants. That's about 5% of the amateur radio population in those 2 countries.
All right, now, I went to Field Day last year. And, boy, down in Mississippi, we got just drenched in rain. We got 9 inches of rain that morning. Wasn't much of a field day, so I know the guys down in Olive Branch didn't make many points. When I got there, they were up on the picnic table holding a tarp over the equipment, trying to stay dry. But there's been some really nice field days, so hopefully the weather will turn out good this year for everybody.
Well, hopefully it will be where people go. Field Day is a great time of year to showcase to the public community what amateur radio is about. And so I really encourage those listeners out there who are in North America to really promote your Field Day locations and invite the public, invite elected officials, appointed officials, and media and the public in general to come on out and take a look at what amateur radio is about. And if you have a go-to station, get on the air station, then invite some people to sit down and do a QSO or two.
You know, we each year QSO broadcasts Field Day live on shortwave, and what that amounts to is we're on, and we have Field Day locations calling in from all over the country. And my first one I did, I was afraid we weren't going to get calls, but the phone went all day long and into the night, and it was really amazing. It really was. So anyone listening overseas, or someone who was just a shortwave listener that just didn't have any idea what Field Day was, by the time they listened for several hours, they were an expert, I can tell you, because we heard everything about, including the various chefs across the country preparing all kinds of food for Field Day, and that was a real interesting thing to listen to. So we'll have more about that on the website coming up here within the week or so. We'll have the phone number for call-in and all that kind of stuff. So Bill's called in several times. As a matter of fact, he was traveling across the country, would call from different locations.
And he did. You caught me when I was section manager for North Carolina. You caught me between visits, Ted, and it was a pleasure to join you. I think we need to put out a recipe book, don't you? Favorite Field Day recipes. I think that could be a bestseller.
It probably would be. I mean, because I'll tell you, we've heard everything. I mean, you couldn't imagine some of the stuff that's being done and cooked on Field Day.
Well, I'm going for the food this year.
The food is always great. One year we had one of the field days I went to, some guy had bought at a yard sale a deep fryer specializing in making onion rings. And he just cooked up a batch of onion rings. He got so into it that he was serving onion rings to any visitors who came not only through Saturday night, but Sunday morning. So instead of offering them donuts, he was offering them fresh fried onion rings. And that got, we kind of had to counsel him that we're excited on his behalf that he mastered the art of frying in the fryer, but that fried onion rings were not an appropriate dietary selection on a Sunday morning.
I don't see anything wrong with that. I mean, as long as you got something to dip them in, you know, like,
absolutely,
like white gravy, you know, or something.
So, yeah. So Field Day is not a low cholesterol weekend.
Oh yeah. So let's hey, Field Day. I guess have your sons gone to Field Day with you? I know they're hams, right? Tell me about your sons.
They are hams. They are. I'm going to give a shout out to my older son Reed, W4RSM, and my younger son Lieutenant J.G. Grant Morine, United States Navy, W4GHM. And yes, they have gone out in the past. They are not as active as they once were, but they got licensed at ages 10 and 11. And one of the things tonight I'd love to talk about is for those parents out there that have kids who have gotten their tickets and are kind of wondering what they can do for the summer. I've got some summer suggestions that can make ham radio a lot of fun, particularly for technician licensees.
Okay. What do you think about your kids getting their license though way before you, man? I mean, they did it at a young age. What happened to you?
Well, now, wait a minute now. Let's get some basics out of the way here, Tom. That yes, I'm very, very proud of them, both of them. I could be one of those old timers and say that they didn't have to take the code, which I did when I sat in the FCC office, much like you. But I think it's a great opportunity, particularly to see so many young technicians coming in, and then that increasingly, and it is good, that we are providing more and more a pathway for people in the United States to move up the ranks from technician to general to amateur extra. In fact, I saw some great statistics, which I haven't looked at lately. I looked at them when I was in my last year as North Carolina section manager, and we were seeing that the amount of people who were upgrading from technician to general and amateur extra classes was increasing. In other words, there was a healthy trend that after a long time of people just sitting at tech were actually moving up. And that trend is continuing. So that's something that's very encouraging to amateur radio in general.
Well, I would like to encourage everyone out there. There's nothing wrong with a tech license. I started as a novice, 5 words a minute in code, and that's all I did. And hey, I had fun doing it. But I'd like to encourage all the techs out there. Now that the code is not a requirement, they need to work on that general license. Get out there and upgrade, and it'll open up just a whole lot more new things.
And that brings me, Tom, to my next 2 shout-outs that I want to give tonight of encouragements. Shout-out number 1 is to Garner Fleming, KK4CLY. Garner is a 16-year-old honors student in Burlington, North Carolina. He plays 3 sports, football in the fall, basketball in the winter, and he is in track and field as a shot putter in the spring. He has now upgraded to general, but when he was a technician, and I hope everybody who's sitting down, who's a viewer or a listener in the United States, as a technician, he had 189 countries confirmed.
That is
that's amazing.
Yeah.
Isn't that great?
Totally amazing.
And what he did is, of course, the obvious strategies. He used, he parked his rig on 6 meters and looked there for openings. He worked the 10-meter sideband privileges for techs between 28.3 and 28.5 megahertz. And even though there's no code requirement any longer, he learned rudimentary Morse code and used what were the old novice CW privileges, which are now available to technicians. And that's how he was able, before he sat down and passed his general license, to get 189 countries confirmed. And so when I run across technician class licensees who say, well, there's not much I can do with the license, I just say phooey. And I trot out Garner as a great representative of what you can do with a technician license.
Well, something I was going to say, and this has been on my mind. When we got our novice licenses years ago, we had to get up to at least 5 words a minute to pass the test. Okay, so that means we did a lot of learning and offline, I guess I want to call it. In other words, we weren't on the air. We were copying code. We were sending code. Until we got to the 5-minute level. Well, today we've got people that are wanting to learn the code, and I think there ought to be an authorization, a small portion on the band, a sliver, as you would, maybe like 7100 to 7150, the old novice band, where extremely slow coders are encouraged to operate. I don't care if they can only do 2 words a minute. Get them on the air doing code in that little narrow area, and let them communicate back and forth to each other as they learn on the air. I think that would be really a cool thing, and it would encourage, I think, a lot of people to get on, and it would take away the intimidation, because I listen, and I hear guys on the air going slow, and they'll be sending QRO, and there's a fella comes back that just slams right over the top of them at 15, 20 words a minute. And good and well that person that's sitting there barely sending, cannot copy that. So it'd be kind of nice to put them in an area where they all can talk to each other, and the bullies will stay at their, the real high speed area where they really kind of belong, if that makes any sense at all.
Well, it makes sense. And I'm encouraged that I hear some good slow code in the old 40 novice band right now, as you said, Ted, 7.1 to 7.15. And I hear some slow code also down around 3.5 to 3.5, 3.55 to 3.57 or so in that area around this time of night. And that's good. I'm glad to hear that. Something more formal, such as you're suggesting, I think is very worthy of consideration.
I just, in listening, I hear I hear that interchange all the time where somebody's really just calling CQ, and you can tell they're probably somewhere between 5 and 10 words a minute. I mean, they're not moving very fast at all, you know. And then here comes this guy lickety split. I can't even copy him, you know. And I'm thinking, why are you doing this? You know, why are you doing this? I can copy the guy's call sign, and that's about it. Yeah. But I'm not a speed demon on code either, but you know.
Well, I'm not a speed demon either. I've got my extra many years ago. I haven't worked hardly any CW, but you know, it's kind of like riding a bicycle. I can get over here and still do CW. I can probably do, 13 words a minute. So, but I agree with you. Hey, Ted, that would be a great deal, man, to bring a little segment back to let people have those HF privileges.
Well, get them, activate the HF privileges. Remember, like Garner, they already exist, and so I've got 2 suggestions for the summer months. Let me get my fingers. Here we go. It's a little tough when you're in the mic here. There we go. No, that's not the victory sign. I'm just pointing out I've got 2 suggestions for young hams for the summer. So suggestion number 1 is, if you're a technician, take advantage of the opportunities you have on HF. Learn the code, get on there, and when 10 meters is open, get on. And maybe you could work DXCC by the end of the summer. Wouldn't that be cool?
Well,
as a technician,
that would be. And I want to tell you guys something too. I mean, there's so many different aspects about ham radio. I've had my license 51 years, extra class, and I don't know how many countries I worked. I never went far. I don't have any certificates up there. I don't have DXCC or any of those. I've got boxes and boxes of DXQSL cards. I have no idea how many countries I worked. Probably, 120 to 180. Who knows? But, I just never went for that. I just enjoyed the hobby and talking to people.
Well, we are in an achievement-oriented society, and if you're not into that, that's great. But I know I've run across parents who, even if the parents are hams, they're scratching their head saying, what can the kids do for the summer? And my first suggestion is get a 6-meter rig, and if it has sideband, park it on the calling frequency for sideband, 50.125, or if it's an FM only rig, park it on the FM calling frequency of 52.525. And wait for a band opening. I had an interesting experience many years ago. I put one of my rigs on 50.125, put the squelch on, and forgot about it. And about 10 days later, I heard these strange voices in my shack, and I had totally forgotten that I had turned it on. So I grabbed a baseball bat, and I was tiptoeing to the door of the shack, wondering if I had intruders. And only then did I realize, 6 meters is open.
I've kind of done the same thing here. I haven't worked in 6 meters in many, many years, man. And lately, I threw up a little antenna out there, and I've been listening. And the last few days, I've heard a few openings, but you got to kind of leave the radio on and kind of wait for it to happen, because it just comes in and out,
guys. Man. Remember, where's the camera? Here we go. Remember. Yeah. This weekend is the annual summer version of the ARRL VHF contest, VHF UHF contest.
Well, I can guarantee
there'll be a lot of people on this weekend.
I'll tell you, the 6-meter band will be full that day. You wonder, is it really not an opening, or are people just being quiet? Even just like this contest this weekend you're talking about. Hey, when the band conditions are bad and you get all these hams on there, they're on there. They're talking.
That's right. That's right.
So, make an opening.
Now, can I move on to shout out number 2?
You sure can. Let's do it.
All right. So shout out number 1 was what you can do as a technician. I acknowledged Garner KK4CLY and his accomplishment of 189 countries confirmed as a technician before he upgraded to general. All right, here's shout out number 2. And again, the same theme. What's a great summer project? So project number 1 was listen on 6 meters as a technician. Start doing some 10-meter sideband between 28.3 and 28.5. Learn some CW and take a hand at getting on there. Now, another great summer project. is, and we have a lot of viewers tonight, viewers and listeners, because apparently I got an email that this community was going to be watching and listening tonight, and that's the Satelliters. And so I'm giving a shout out. I'm going to hold this up, and I'm hoping that the viewers on tonight, and I'll pronounce this for the listeners on wtww. Wow, let me try and get this card here.
Just raise it this right there. There you go.
All right. This is, can you focus in on that, Tom? That's the QSL card of, there we go.
That's good.
That is KD8CAO Doug, I hope I pronounced his last name correctly, Pape of Zeeland, Michigan. This was a very, very cool story. My wife and I have a 1/13th ownership in a beach house in a wonderful community known as Bald Head Island, North Carolina. It's off the coast. You can only get there by ferry. And what makes it great from a ham radio standpoint is it's in a very rare grid. It's one of the 3 rare grids in North Carolina for those who are after the Fred Fisher Award, which is like a VHF type award. And this guy, Doug, got a hold of me, knew I was on the island, and he has collected all 488 grids in the United States. I don't know if that's continental grids or that includes Hawaii and Alaska. But he needed number 488, and the grid that I was in, FM 13, was the final grid. And so I gave him his final 488th grid in satellite, and I just thought I wanted to give him a shout out tonight because I think that is just a great accomplishment.
It is, and I've got an email from him today right here, and I was gonna bring that story up, and that's from, is it John?
That's his
Pape?
dad.
Yeah, and he's talking about how you went to, what is it, Bald Head Island, the rare FM 13. And I understand that there's just a little bit of that portion of that island that's in the grid, I believe. So.
That's right. The grid's mostly ocean, and even Bald Head Island itself is split between 2 grids. I've actually done some rover work, which is permissible, where you straddle 2 different grids. You have to take accurate GPS readings and to do that. And so I've done that while I'm down there.
Yeah, and that was a continental U.S. 400. You gave him the 488 continental USA grid.
And there's another summer project, and what I want to talk about here is working easy FM satellites. Particularly the most popular one is SO50. And I know of people who have been able to earn the VUCC, the VHF UHF Century Club Award, the 100 grids within one summer, because satellite activity, FM satellite activity especially, really takes off in the summertime, and you get an awful lot of people on the road and do remote grids, sometimes grids that normally aren't activated. So that's a great award, another great summer type, if you will, piece of wallpaper or accomplishment that the technician class licensee can try to attain. So one of the reasons I want to get on tonight and share with you is that for our younger hams who may, again, feel confined that the tech license doesn't give them opportunities, that's a lot of hooey. There's a lot of great things that can be done with a tech license that is beyond just your standard FM repeater work. And
it doesn't cost a lot of money. You don't need to buy a lot of expensive equipment or antennas.
No, you don't.
People are working satellites with handy talkies.
Right, and that's exactly the point I wanted to bring up, that whether you get a vintage Japanese model HT or you get one of the newer Chinese HTs, I'm moving my head in the screen here trying to sit up straight, that whatever it is, for a lot of these HTs you can pick up with dual VFOs for satellite capability for less than $100, and you don't need to buy a commercial antenna. You can make your own. VHF, UHF antennas really do lend themselves to homebrew. And all in, you could, for less of like $100, $125, you can easily work satellites.
Well, and don't forget the space station up here. Work the astronauts. That's where I made friends with Doug Wheelock, and we've had Doug on our show, a number of times, and it's amazing. I mean, you got to be persistent and keep at it, because I tried for months and months and I never could work at space station. But you know what? When I did work it, I worked it 30 times the same month, and I worked it 3 times mobile coming home. What do you think about
Yeah,
that?
yeah. We got a friend here in my hometown of Wilmington, North Carolina, who has just casually traveling in his car has just put out a shout when the space station's gone overhead, and he has contacted astronauts, I think, twice, and just using his mobile antenna on top of his car.
Well, you know, there are all types of awards out there. We've got a pretty good Memphis group that does satellite. There's a lot of them, or several of them on here. I know there's a lot of the MSET people on here tonight. But Damon WA4HFN wanted me to mention starcomgroup.org. Now, I'm not sure. I know Damon and some of the guys have made a certificate, I think, called 5 and EM55. That's our grid here. So if you work 5 stations here, you get a nice certificate. So there's a lot of things out there, you know, to collect.
There is, and again, we're here. School has, at least here in North Carolina, school just let out. I think some of the northeastern schools won't be getting out for another week or two. But wouldn't it be great to have a little summertime goal and see how many grids you might be able to make, either on 6 meters or 2 meters by satellite, or this weekend by sideband? Learn a little code, get on 10-meter sideband. You could really have a fun summer, and really pave the way to an enjoyable part of the hobby.
And then I think there's some rare ones that you don't get a chance to work very often. Don't people take a radio maybe on some of these cruise ships, and when they're out in the ocean out there, don't they try to work through some of these satellites?
Well, they do. It's a little bit problematic, Tom, because technically when you're at sea, you are on the jurisdiction of the flag of registration of the vessel.
Right.
And if the vessel is licensed out of Nassau, Bahamas, which a lot of them are, luckily there's a CEPT reciprocal arrangement where, from a licensing standpoint, that wouldn't be a problem. Another favorite locale is for cruise ships to be registered is the island of Malta. And that is an $80 charge to get a Maltese license. But the bigger thing is you cannot operate without the permission of both the security department of the cruise line and the captain of the vessel. Both have to give their consent before you can. So if you don't get that, you really should not be operating at sea. But if you all those things fall into place, the answer is yes. And there are a couple of ham-friendly cruise lines. Carnival is a ham-friendly cruise line. Holland America is a ham-friendly cruise line.
All right. Well, in the chat room, Damon is telling me again. He was talking about Doug. Doug says, worked him for number 488. I issued the Gridmaster Award, number 3, from our Starcom group. I'm not sure what that is. Are you familiar with the Gridmaster Award?
No, I'm not.
Maybe that's a local award these guys did. He's saying look it up on QRZ, but I'm not able to look it up during the show here, so I don't have a lot of information.
Well, I'm very embarrassed to say I'm not a satellite. What's the word I want to look for? I'm very much a satellite enthusiast, but I'm not devoted. And so when I go to rare grids like FM13 on Bald Head Island, it's so much fun to see the enthusiasts come out, because the word spreads on the internet very quickly that there's somebody in the rare grid, and you become a very hot commodity. It's like having a pileup. It's a satellite pileup. I don't do a lot of satellite when I'm out of the area. I should. And I don't have my VUCC. That would be a fun award for even me to try and get this summer. So maybe I'll put the challenge out there, and maybe we'll try and come back here shortly after Labor Day and see how successful I've been.
Well, it's been about 3 or 4 years since I worked a lot of satellite. I got into it pretty heavy for about 2 or 3 years. Worked, and then I tell you, after I worked all the satellites and worked the space station so many times, I thought I'd just give it a rest and let other people enjoy it.
Yeah, you do hear a lot of the same calls.
Yeah.
And before we move on to another subject, Tom, remember, when kids say to their parents, well, why would I want to do satellites? Parents have to remember that old joke, because they're out of this world.
Okay. All right.
I know. Keep my day job.
So hey, speaking of your job, were you supposed to give are you supposed to give a station ID or something? Did you want to do that? I don't know when we're supposed to do it.
Ted, when are we supposed to give the radio station ID?
Well, actually, at the top of the hour, but you can go ahead because we generally run one at the bottom of the hour anyway. So,
all right, can I do it?
Yeah, absolutely. Go right ahead.
Thank you. Okay. Coming to you adjacent to the music capital of the United States of America and streaming out of the great state of Tennessee, this is wtww, Lebanon, Tennessee, the United States of America.
There you go.
You know, Ted, I honestly think he's going to take your job away from you. If
By the way, I've never done station ID except on Call This Radio, so that was a thrill for me. Ted, I can cross that off my bucket list. Thank you.
There you go.
You made my night.
Oh man, it sounded. Hey, I tell you, you were up there close. It sounded almost as good as Ted. I won't say you were there yet, but
nothing can hold a candle to Ted. He's got the voice.
Yeah,
he really does.
So we've talked about satellites now, and hey, we haven't talked much about Boy Scouts. I know you're very active in Boy Scouts and the K2BSA station and all that. Let's talk a little about that.
Well, the whole Boy Scout thing is extremely interesting because there's so much great history to it. Interestingly, the Boy Scout movement and amateur radio movement almost parallel one another time-wise. That's a really cool thing. We have pictures. Scouting in the United States came about in 1910. And in the 1911 Boy Scout Handbook, there's actually a section on what was then called wireless communications, and showed a very primitive receiver and encouraged scouts to learn Morse code. And so there's been this hand-in-hand relationship with Boy Scouts that's gone back for over a century now. And the most visible sign is K2BSA, the resident call sign at Boy Scout headquarters in Richardson, Texas. That's where the U.S. headquarters is located. And K2BSA portable stations you often will hear on the air, and then each call district many times has its own Boy Scout station, such as W1BSA, W4BSA, and so forth. So a lot of activity, a lot of young voices on the air, and the seminal event in scouting and ham radio takes place the third week of October every year with what's called JOTA, Jamboree on the Air. And JOTA is unique for two reasons, and those two reasons are, number one, it is not a U.S.-only Boy Scout event. It is a global event. And Boy Scout units around the world participate. And here's the other cool thing. It's not confined to Boy Scouts. It's all scouting, including Girl Scouts. So Cub Scouts, Girl Scouts, Venture Scouts, which is like the graduate school, if you will, of Boy Scouting. And Boy Scouts get on. And what that does for Tom and Ted and listeners and viewers is that JOTA is officially the largest scouting event in the world. It with about 500,000 participants, which means it eclipsed the next largest scouting event, which is the National United States Jamboree, which has 40,000 participants.
And of course, then that is an amateur radio event that is the largest scouting event.
Yes. And the Radio Merit Badge is I'm doing this from memory now. It is in the top 20 elective badges. There are 123 merit badges. 21 of those are required if a scout wants to move on to the rank of Eagle, which is the highest ranking in the United States for scouting. So that leaves 102 badges which are elective in nature. And radio, last I checked, is in either the top 20 or top 25 of elective badges. There's somewhere, it's either 4,000 or 8,000 of those badges bestowed every year, the Radio Merit Badge.
One of our viewers, Jill, she had sent me a note earlier wanting to have someone talk about getting young girls into amateur radio. Now, I noticed you just mentioned girls there with the guys. I mean,
Oh.
the Boy Scouts, are boys, I guess, but do you know any more about this? I mean, do they come together at any point for these jamborees or anything? I'm not a scout, or not recently anyway.
No, usually they don't. However, I have seen Boy Scouts who are camping in one place during the JOTA weekend, and separately Girl Scouts at another campground, not within walking distance, but far away. And the two of them have talked back and forth by 2-meter simplex over JOTA weekend. And that's been with supervising adults at both ends. But that's been a great way to introduce both rounds. And I know of a YL here in my home area who's been active in Girl Scouts. And on JOTA weekend, she has headed up a radio group just for Girl Scouts in the area. So for those listening, I really recommend the Girl Scout movement. I'm trying to remember what the badge is within Girl Scouts, because it's explicitly called the Radio Merit Badge in Boy Scouts. In Girl Scouts, I believe it's called Communications, in which amateur radio would qualify as a requirement.
I'm just trying to pick up some of the chat room here. A lot of people are interested in talking about the Boy Scouts there and how that started their interest in radio. Jill, thank you for talking about the girls part there.
Yeah, thank you, Joe. And Jill, we need more YLs on the air, so I'm all for Girl Scouts and any activity that would get young women on the air. And Tom, we could talk about a derivative of the Boy Scout thing. Is this whole? I'm a big proponent of the STEM movement. You are familiar with STEM? STEM?
I'm not. Let's talk about it.
All right, STEM, a lot of folks may have heard about it. STEM, S-T-E-M, stands for Science, Technology, Engineering, and Math. It's an initiative by the United States Department of Education. It was started in the year 2010 by then, and he may still be, the current Secretary of Education, Arne Duncan. And amateur radio just lends itself so incredibly well to STEM. And a lot of people don't realize that amateur radio is such a great fit, because think of what the 4 things I just mentioned there: science, technology, engineering, and math. All 4 of those are in amateur radio. And in fact, I add a third S and make it STEMS, because our second S, with social studies, because if you're talking to stations that are distant, you can put up a map and go over some geography. STEM has been great. We have seen STEM in action. One of the things that you had mentioned earlier, Tom, about the International Space Station, and are you familiar with ARISS, A-R-I-S-S, which is the Amateur Radio International Space Station program?
Yes, I am.
And that's where schools and a teacher within the school applies for the opportunity for his or her class or a group of students from that school to speak with astronauts while the International Space Station is making a pass over their area. I had the honor of being at an ARISS event in April of 2014, just a little over a year ago. Very well organized, by the way. And in that 13-minute pass, there were some 20 kids who got to ask questions from the lead astronaut. And it was all done through amateur radio. Highly, highly successful. Good media coverage. And the kids learned a lot about radio, atmospherics, propagation, space travel, astronomy, and all that fit into the school's STEM program. So I'm a huge proponent of STEM and amateur radio's application within STEM.
Well, that's just talking to astronauts really gets these kids going. They really like it. And when we do have Doug on, he spends so much time. He is so good with the kids, and he talks to them and answers their questions, and he'll do that for an 8-hour period. Signing pictures and autographs and talking about working the radio up here. It doesn't complain about anything, and we're going to try to have Doug on the show. I sent him an email here yesterday, and hopefully we'll have him on the show one night. We can talk more about this aspect of ham radio, and maybe we can get some more youth involved here.
Well, that gets back to Jill's thing.
Let me say one thing.
Yeah.
AC8NP in the chat room mentions, and I'm not familiar with the Boy Scout programs, but he says Venturing is a youth development program of the Boy Scouts of America for young men and women who are 14 years of age. So obviously there's a program there that I'm not aware of. Are you familiar with Venturing?
A little bit. I've never had a venture group. I'm aware of them, and yes, it is coeducational. Usually, there's a theme. Venture, whereas Cub Scouts, Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts are generalists in the sense that they cover a myriad of subjects in which to expose kids so that they get a generalist education of overall skills for life. Venturing has a theme-related focus, such as a amateur radio venture group, maybe a maritime conservation venturing group, I don't know if this exists, a skateboarding venture group. So usually they're theme-oriented. But yes, I'm somewhat familiar, and yes, there are amateur radio venture groups.
Well, hey, I need to mention this too, since we've talked a little about satellite again. Damon, WA4HFN, that's Hot Friday Night, WA4 Hot Friday Night. If you go to his QRZ page, there's a lot of awards that you can get by working satellite, some special awards there. So I wanted to mention that while we're on the subject of satellite. WA4HFN on QRZ.com.
Good. Satellite is great. Before we run out of time, I don't know how much time you want to spend with me.
We got a few more minutes. It's a really interesting story tonight. What else we talk about tonight?
Well, I want to spend a couple of minutes, and what I'm about to talk about was geared for the United States. I want the international viewers and listeners to pay attention to this too, because I just traveled last month extensively throughout South America, and I'm seeing, I'm about to describe the same types of constraints and problems that we hams are seeing here in the United States. I think many other nations are also, or the hams in those nations are also beginning to experience this. So I want to talk about some legislation before the U.S. Congress, Bill H.R. 1301, known as the Amateur Radio Parity Act of 2015. But the details of that bill, I think, have a trickle-down effect that could impact hams living in other nations around the globe. So I hope they'll indulge me and listen for a few minutes, because what I'm about to describe could impact your international audience as well as your American-based audience. Would that be okay, Tom?
Sure. And I had written me a little note about homeowner associations. Is that kind of part of this?
Well, it is. And what that means is that a very brief history. Back in 1985, the Federal Communications Commission released a regulation known as PRB1, which said hams deserve reasonable accommodation to put up antennas. First of all, it was a regulation. It is not a law. So it doesn't have quite the bite or power that an actual enacted law would have. But it was as close as we in the amateur radio community could get. And it's held up pretty well. It's been a pretty good piece of law that has helped to many amateurs to get towers and antennas up. But what has happened is we know there's been a exponential growth here in the United States of housing that is under what we call HOAs, homeowners associations. And when you enter into a relationship in a community with an HOA, you are, as a property owner, you're actually entering into a contract. And in that contract may be what are known as CC&Rs, codes, covenants, and restrictions. And one of those CCRs might be that you cannot put up an antenna. So even though we have favorable laws and regulations like PRB1, and by the way, some 30 out of the 50 U.S. states have state laws that enforce PRB1, meaning reasonable accommodations for antennas. My own home state of North Carolina is one of those 30 which has a very favorable antenna law. These laws do not apply into HOAs where a owner of that property has voluntarily entered into, through the purchase agreement, a CC&R, covenant, code, and restriction. So if you willingly buy the property, you can't go back, you shouldn't be able to go back retroactively and say, well, now that I own, I want to put up an antenna, because you've signed a contract that agreed to the terms of those CC&Rs. HR 1301 would give a waiver or an exemption to amateur radio antennas, much the way that satellite television dishes, such as those vendors like DirecTV and Dish TV, have smaller dishes where, even though there may be an antenna restriction, there is a federal law that exempts it from HOAs and allows a waiver to go in where those residents can put in a television satellite dish. HR 1301 would do the same thing for ham radio antennas. And where this is critical, Tom and Ted and your listeners and your viewers out there, is that here in the United States, we don't have all the statistics, but we do know now that a majority of housing units in the United States are moving towards being inside HOAs. Now, what that means is, for example, in my home state of North Carolina, according to the State Homeowners Trade Association, 62% of housing units are within HOAs. That does not mean that every single one of those units has an antenna restriction, but it does mean that the majority of housing units in the state of North Carolina are under an HOA. If we take that and extract that across the rest of the United States, we could say with some degree of reasonableness that maybe half the amateur radio community might be living in HOA restricted housing. And that could also mean that roughly half of the amateur radio population might be prohibited from being able to put up an antenna at their home QTH.
Wow.
There's some discussion on how, even if you're in one of those situations, you can then petition the local group and seek permission to override their rule. Okay, now I'm told that in some cases that's worked real well, but the ones that wind up fighting it, I think, are the ones that we haven't done a PR job on. In other words, those same people need to be invited into a ham shack somewhere and let somebody operate and let them see what ham radio is all about. And once they see what's going on and hear what's going on, the witch hunt is then over, if that makes any sense, for the most part.
Yes and no. And by the way, Ted, you raise an excellent point. I'm hearing some very gratifying and good stories that hams who have purchased in HOAs have been able to overcome the restriction with permission from the board that manages the HOA. I've also heard hams say to me, well, you shouldn't have bought a piece of property inside an HOA. Well, that's sometimes a very convenient thing to say, but sometimes people who aren't hams develop their interest in amateur radio after they've purchased in a home with an HOA. So we're precluding newly licensed hams. And then sometimes you run across somebody that may live in a HOA that may be there out of necessity, such as it may be an assisted living neighborhood where an older ham may have moved there, but because of antenna restrictions may have to take his or her station down. And so not one size fits all. That's something I want to do. So I know we're coming up at the top of the hour. Do you want me to finish up on this topic?
That's up to you, I guess. Go ahead and do that.
Yeah.
And then you're going to have
Go
to
right ahead.
You're going to have to do a station ID at the top of the hour too.
Yeah, if you keep talking, you'll have to do another station ID, I guess.
You're going to be really busy.
I'll gladly do the station ID. I didn't know if we had a cutaway at 59 minutes and X seconds after the hour.
No, we are.
All right.
No consultants here. No consultants.
That's the trouble with getting too old. You remember all those constraints. We got to get away at the top of the hour for news. And so well, good. Because this is very important. I want to go on for this, just not long, but for a couple more minutes to explain the necessity for this. So this bill that has been introduced right now, of the 435 members in the U.S. House of Representatives, as of today, 66 of the 435 have signed on to co-sponsor the bill, and that's very encouraging. We are hoping, we being ARRL, as the National Association for Amateur Radio, hopes that more representatives will sign on. Now, there's a very insidious argument two insidious arguments that are coming about from opposition to this bill that I want to make sure that people know about, because I think both arguments are, to use a $10 SAT word, specious, meaning I don't think they have a lot of foundation, but these arguments are coming from people who don't understand amateur radio. Argument number one is, you don't need an antenna unless there's an emergency, and then we'll waive the restrictions. So if we really need your services, you'll be able to get on the air. And again, that's another one of those phooey things, because what makes amateur radio so successful is that operators are on the air frequently and know what frequencies to go to, know the condition of the equipment. They're developing and improving their operating skills continually. And if they don't have the opportunity to get on the air and practice, then they're not going to be effective when there is a true emergency. So argument number one, we'll waive the antenna restriction when there's a true emergency and put up the antenna. That is detrimental to not only the amateur radio operator himself or herself, but is also detrimental to the community that they're trying to serve in the event of emergency. We're coming up to the top of the hour. For those of you listening on radio, you're listening to wtww, Lebanon, Tennessee. How about that, Ted? I got it right at the top of the hour.
There you go.
Is that a pro or is that a pro?
That's a pro. That's a pro.
All right. And then the second part of the argument, and this is the other insidious argument relative to the opposition to H.R. 1301, the Amateur Radio Parity Act, and that is the new technology of remote operating. There's now a sub-thread in these arguments that there's now technology out there. We've all seen it in the various trade publications that you can operate a ham radio station remotely. And so much so that if you don't want to put up your own remote station, you can actually rent out DX capability, and that's fun. But as I try to explain to people, there are three major facets to amateur radio. There's radio sport, which is the traditional type of ham radio that we all know, which is getting on the air, rag chewing, DXing, contesting, actually operating on the air. That's radio sport. That's number one. There's the other movement, which is the historical movement and today movement of what I call experimentation. And in there, I would lump the concept we just talked about of STEM, also do-it-yourself, the whole Maker Faire movement, which is the electronic hobbyist movement. That's another aspect of amateur radio. If you're into radio sport or you're into experimentation, then the remote argument might radio, and that's in emergency communications and public service. Because when there's a declared disaster, even your capability to operate remotely may be curtailed because of internet access or lack of access to your remote transmitter site. And that's where the argument has to be that amateur radio has to be able to function properly on an on-premises basis, a standalone basis at your home QTH. So these are arguments that are actually becoming more pronounced in the HOA community, which is opposing H.R. 1301. So what I'm calling for tonight is that I would like all those viewers and listeners in the United States of America, if you have not already contacted your representative in the United States House of Representatives to support H.R. 1301, I hope you will at least look up their website and drop them an email and ask for their consideration.
All right.
Well, did everybody get that?
Did everybody get that?
We need to do this. We need to do this.
Yeah. Contact your rep.
Yeah.
It's really interesting, though, because I have had friends that got involved in one of these things, and they wouldn't even let them put up like an invisible dipole in their backyard. I mean, they sent a guy out looking for that thin wire to see if he could find it,
Yeah.
I don't have the patience for that. I just tie the guy up in it, is what I do.
And we get the others who say, let's put it up and we'll ask for forgiveness later. The one that saddens me and why I get so passionate about this was we had a nice young man in my hometown here who at age 12 got his tech license. And on his back porch in his townhouse, he put up a 4-foot tall 2-meter J-pole that was encased in white PVC pipe. And the architectural committee came around one afternoon behind his house, saw that and said, what's that? And he told them very honestly what it is. And they told him, take it down. And he hasn't been on the air since. And we overall in the ham radio community lost a very potentially valuable young operator who was participating in ARES, who was running nets, because another authority told him to take down a 4-foot tall antenna. And take that story and replicate it across the country, and now you've got a force that's not there. And this whole thing about not being able to operate from your own neighborhood, I live in an area that is very prone to hurricanes. I'm in the 10th most probable landfall strike zone of hurricanes in the United States. And I've lived through many a hurricane. We've had 3 disastrous hurricanes in the last 20 years. And we lost landline copper capability. We lost internet capability and cell phone towers. When the system wasn't as hardened then. I'll get back to cell phones in a second. So in our own neighborhood, which was had suffered greatly, you get people who get lacerations, who get cuts, who may get snake bites, who may have a medical condition that needs attention, but a tree is blocking the road for their access to go to a dialysis center. And if you're the only guy in there with communications capability and you have an HT that can't hit the local repeater to get that word out, but you're restricted from putting an antenna up, then what good do you serve the community if you can't reach out to those authorities who need to be notified?
Well, you make a very good point there, Bill. I just don't see how they keep restricting these things. So I guess if we fight and contact our representatives, maybe we can get the laws changed a little bit more in our favor.
Well, we need some relief. We really do. I worry about I worry about the future of ham radio from the point that those who want to be able to access may not be able to have the capability that they do. Not everybody is going to be able to do remote ham work, even if they have the technology available. They may not have the money, they may not have the resources, they may not have the capability to do that. And that's an argument just along the one that, well, you don't need to operate from your home until an actual disaster strikes, and then we'll waive the restriction on antennas. I think that's a very foolhardy approach. Plus, many of these homeowner associations who are opposing amateur radio antennas, they look at the satellite dish and argument. Now, there's no comparison in terms of numbers. There are 720,000 licensed amateur radio operators in the United States. We, to our best estimate, and we have no idea what this is, there's somewhere between 300 and 400,000 active operators. If you take that algorithm I said earlier that about half the housing units in the United States may be under some kind of HOA restriction, now that base of active hams drops to somewhere between 100 and 200,000 people versus the 14 million satellite dishes that are allowed to be put up in HOA restricted areas. I don't think we're a real threat to these communities. And that's the message that ham radio operators need to take to their local, state, and federal elected officials.
I was just going to say, I just recall, this has been about 2 years ago, a bad snowstorm here. And it really was not bad as compared to, let's say, what I would be used to up north near Detroit or Saginaw or Flint. Those were some really bad storms, But this was just, it was just bad enough to get everybody to a crawl. And I remember being on I-40 and picking up my cell phone. And every cell phone around was dead for the next 3-4 hours. You could not make a phone call. And that was just a snowstorm. Okay, so I'm going to say, can you imagine? Can you imagine another type of event that doesn't end in 3 or 4 hours? An event that goes for days, So, these people are foolhardy when they don't realize how valuable it is. If they only knew, they would be saying, let us help you put up your 50-foot tower in the back of your house. Let us give you a hand with this.
Well,
because when the time comes, they're going to wish that they had the contact with the outside world.
Absolutely. And you raise it, Ted, thank you for the segue. I just want to go on record and say I did not pay you or prompt you for this segue, but it was perfect. And that's what makes you the professional that you are, Ted Randall, on the QSO show. And that is, cell towers are engineered to handle roughly, I think today's requirement is 8 hours of normal call traffic. Now notice the key word there, normal call traffic. If you've got a disaster that's hit your area, the volume of usage goes up. And when it goes up, the demand of the constraints, particularly if that cell tower is under emergency power, and most of them, by the way, are under battery power, not generator power. Then the consumption of electricity from that battery goes down from the 8 hours, because the 8 hour was designed for normal traffic load, not for accelerated traffic load in an emergency or disaster. Now, what if you've got a sustained disaster? What happens after 4 hours, 6 hours, and the cell tower runs out of juice and you suddenly have no signal? Again, this is part of the argument where you've got to be able to tell government officials that we are a valuable resource. And in fact, I want to trot out a couple of numbers. I think I trotted these out, Ted, when I was on your QSO radio show, but I want to talk, if I may. And Tom, am I monopolizing the conversation? I apologize.
Not at all. You're our guest tonight. That's why we have you on here.
I'm on a roll. I feel like in that movie Animal House when they're before the dean and they're appealing, and one of them says, "Should we interrupt?" And the guy goes, "Shh, he's on a roll. Let him go." That's kind of where I am right now. I did some calculations here in North Carolina in the year 2007 when the North Carolina State Legislature passed its state equivalent of the PRB1 antenna bill. And this is back of the envelope stuff. But what we did was we used a survey that was published about 10 years ago by ARRL, which said that the average active ham, notice the key adjective here, active ham, has an installed base at their home QTH and in their mobile rig of $4,000 worth of equipment. I know plenty of hams that have more than $4,000 equipment. I also know hams that have less than that. But that was the active median appraisal of equipment in a home. And what we did is we assumed that 25% of licensed hams are active. And we took that number, extrapolated it, we put in added to it the cost of repeater installations. We have some 600 repeaters in the state of North Carolina. And overlaid on top of that, when hams donate time to community events such as races, triathlons, marathons, parades. In other words, they contribute their time to coordinating communications on behalf of nonprofit agencies. We use a national website where the current 2013 rate is in North Carolina $21.13 or $21.09 per hour of volunteer time. When you add up the volunteer time and the installed base and the amount of time we figure that hams put in per year on behalf of North Carolina communities, we came up with an accurate figure that the amateur radio community donates annually somewhere between $15 and $20 million of donated times and services which are not charged to the taxpayer. Now, that argument needs to be taken not only state by state, that argument needs to be taken nationally. And I did a back of the envelope. Again, this is me personally. I'm not speaking. I want to go on record. I am not speaking officially on behalf of ARRL or any other organization. This is me personally on a back of the envelope. But I think we could put together a very conservative model and say that amateur radio donates somewhere in the vicinity of $500 million of equipment and services that are not assessed to federal or state taxpayers per year. And that's a story that's not getting out, that we are a community resource. And this is the type of information that needs to be given to government officials, both elected and appointed. These are the type of information that needs to get out to zoning officers who enforce zoning regulations. Because otherwise, I think we're going to see a lot of our antenna rights just close in on us.
You think about that, and if you've always lived somewhere where you've had total and complete freedom and no questioning of anything like that, and then it's hard to imagine the other extreme. It's hard to imagine living somewhere, let's just say it's a house, not a condo or an apartment, and your backyard does not belong to you. So you can't. There's nothing you can do. Regardless of what, even a thin piece of wire, you've got some. I guess I want to say Gestapo parading through the neighborhood looking for the wire. I wonder if they can train dogs to sniff wire antennas. I don't know. That may be the next step of this whole thing.
Well, I apologize. I've been overly passionate and strident about this, but
no, not at all. I don't think so. Do you think so, Tom?
No, sir. I think it's been just a great segment. We've covered a lot of good things, and probably can have Bill back again here in a few months, and we'll talk about some more things and spend a little time on it. But it's been great so far tonight.
Well, thank you.
I don't think he's been overzealous about this antenna stuff, because it affects every amateur, and it affects the hobby as a whole. It affects everything, and I think that if it gets to the point, I honestly believe that the HOAs are one thing, but I wouldn't be a bit surprised to see local cities trying to pass ordinances that forbids, even the minimum amount of like a wire antenna. I mean, I was talking to someone the other day, and they said that they did not want cable, so they got a television antenna, and they put it on their roof to pick up the HD channels and they wanted the extra HD channels that their local TV stations were put out, and they were contacted by their homeowners association and said, get that thing off your roof. You can't put that up there. And I'll tell you what, I got a feeling a good attorney could challenge that and take them to the cleaners.
And I think they could. Yeah. I think they could too, because even an over-the-air non-satellite dish antenna, the exemption for them is something called OTARD. I know it's a funny word, OTARD, over-the-air receiving device. And that exemption means that you're allowed to put up a TV receiving antenna under the OTARD regulation or law, which goes back to either 1999 or 1979. I can't remember which of those 2 years. But a regular TV antenna should be permitted under OTARD, which is a federal exemption. Now, I'm not an attorney, and I don't practice law. I got to get in case this gets out there, I don't want somebody coming after me and saying it. But my understanding is that would qualify.
I wasn't familiar with any of that, but I think the other thing too, and that is these associations and rules and regulations, people once they get cranked up, they really get a high trying to regulate and police everything. It's like I'm sure everyone at some point in time has seen an out of control security guard inside of a parking ramp or in a parking lot somewhere, and man, I'll tell you what, he's more stern than Jack Webb on Dragnet. But there are those personality types, and I guess the thing of it is we somehow though also have to do a PR job on the people that are the powers that be. We got to make sure that there's a whole different feel if a person has actually seen amateur radio in action and seen a QSO take place.
Once again, Ted, have I paid you for this segue? I have not, have I?
No, I did
not rehearse this in advance.
And if you did, I'm telling you, I know he's cheap. So, anyways,
all right. So that gets us back to Field Day. What better chance to educate the public and government officials than inviting them out to your local Field Day on June 27th and June 28th?
Oh, there you go. There you go. But you can get those officials if you can get those officials out there. Then you got to make sure that somebody actually sits down with them or slows them down so that they're not just passing through and glancing at what you're doing. Because then it's always, man, they're horrified by all these bizarre antennas that they see all over the place.
Well, they are, and you very much need, and you bring up another good point. You really need, for a successful Field Day, you need one or more. I call them ambassadors. These are hams who are articulate, can relate well to the general public. The worst thing any Field Day can do is not have somebody greet a visitor to a Field Day site. Even just a general person coming along with curiosity.
Well, that's a good point. I hadn't thought about that. But, if a visitor comes up, maybe these clubs and Field Day organizations need to have that.
Yeah, they do.
PR.
It's not, Tom, very much so. And you're doing a tremendous disservice to not only your club, but to the community if you don't take a moment and somebody says, what's amateur radio about? Let's get back to the PR thing, because this is very interesting. I've been working directly and on the fringes of being an ARL public information officer now for almost 20 years. And the caliber of reporter who comes out on the weekend, the key thing is the least senior reporters, of course, do weekend beats. If you're lucky enough to get a broadcast television reporter to come out to your Field Day site, you are probably going to get somebody who's under the age of 30, and there's a great likelihood that that individual has spent his or her entire life with just a cell phone. And they have no knowledge of a landline twisted pair. They know there's some at the office, but they probably don't have one at home. They've never really experienced citizens band radio. They don't understand that a cell phone in itself is a two-way radio. And so they don't have a clue that amateur radio is really the genesis of what brought about the commercial broadcasting industry. In other words, ironically, these people come out, they're looking at their great grandparent and don't realize that's who it is. And I'm trying to make a metaphor here in terms of that. So the good PIO officer has to sit down and not assume that this person really understands what radio is. And remember this too, it used to be up until a few years ago that when you talked about commercial television, you were talking about somebody who got that signal over the air. Today, something like in metropolitan areas, 92% of commercial television signal delivery into the home is via cable or satellite, meaning only 8% are getting their reception over the air. So the reporter coming to you may have grown up in a household that had strictly cable or strictly satellite and may not have ever had to manually tune in a signal. So you can't get mad at these people. They've never experienced it. So the good organization will sit down with the reporter and patiently explain not only the history, but what the importance is of being able to do point-to-point communications on your own. And that, along with making sure you have an ambassador or a greeting team that can greet any visitors, are two things that will go a long, long way to making your Field Day location very successful.
I think it's definitely a plan ahead and assign specific people who are talkers.
Right.
You know, I learned a long time ago doing some talk radio that there are talkers and there are non-talkers. And when you talk to a non-talker, you can say, well, what do you think about this? And they'll say, nice.
Yeah.
You ask them the question and they'll go for a couple, 3, 4 paragraphs, you know.
Yeah.
So I think planning ahead, getting some talkers trained and on their toes so that when people walk up to the field day location, they're right there to shake a hand and welcome them and ask who they are in case it's a city official that you don't know or they don't know. And then the most important thing, I think, is getting them over to a station and let them see the contacts and maybe even passing the mic over to them and let them talk to somebody. I know,
absolutely.
You know, the one thing that bothers me a little bit about field day, and I don't know how you feel about this, Tom, but sometimes it's too much of a contest. In other words, what I'm saying is it turns into, you know, you're 5'9", blah blah blah, doom, the next, you know, 5'9", boom, you know, just one contact right after another. I mean, you don't even remember what the guy's name was, you know. So I think with something like this, we need to slow down a bit, you know, and see if you can't get the station on the other end to slow down enough to where the person in the tent or wherever you're at can kind of absorb what's going on. Because even though it's a contest and you don't want to break the contest for them, sometimes it moves so quickly that somebody walking in would have no clue as to what's going on.
All right. And once again, Ted, what a good straight man. I'm passing along. I'm holding up the sign here. It's going to be, can't see it again.
To your left.
All right. So, yeah.
To your left a little more. Now up a little. There you go.
All right. This is a field day tip. Field day tip.
Give us a tip.
My apologies to those of you listening on shortwave. I'm trying to incorporate some visuals here, and you don't have the benefit of them. But I was just trying to do something cheesy by putting up a little handmade card that said "Field Day Tip" into the camera for those who are.
Why don't you just tell them to turn the video control up on the shortwave radio?
There we go. You take care of that, Ted. That's where you're making the big bucks.
So Ted, shouldn't there be some way we can modulate that shortwave station with some video?
Do some slow scan over it, yeah, but I don't know who'd be capable of it. It needs to be done by telepathy, you know. That's how.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about that.
There's your next market.
I haven't really thought about that. Maybe we ought to try some slow scan over here next time. Now that might get you in trouble, right?
I don't know what form of on commercial radio. I have no idea what kind of if there isn't even a justification for that sort of a format. But, you know, Tom, I understand you're a renegade. You see, you know, the thing of it is, Bill, he's always trying to break the rules, okay? And I mean, regardless of what I don't know why. I guess, you know.
And, you know, for a non-talker like me, this has been a very difficult evening in interviewing. Would you classify me as a non-talker, Ted?
Oh, yes, absolutely a non-talker.
All right.
Well, I'm sure there's probably, if we hunt really long, we'll probably find somebody to talk more than you.
I'm sure you will. You got me revved up though on the legislation, but I do have a good field day tip, and it's worked for us at my club. Other clubs have done this. There's remember, if you take from one source, it's plagiarism. If you take from more than one source, it's research. So I have researched this, and and it's worked very, very well. You get a go-getter, a talker, as Ted calls them. And what you do is you have that person coordinate something that will happen on Saturday afternoon at the universal start time. And what you do is you invite, and even in a press release and invitations, you invite all the dignitaries, be it the elected officials, the serve agency officials, to come out at, in the Eastern time zone, it's 2 p.m. And you invite the media to come out at 2 p.m. and say invited dignitaries and officials will be there at 2 p.m. And you take a piece of coax cable, old coax cable, a pair of cutters, and instead of cutting a ribbon, you ceremoniously cut an old piece of cable. And everyone claps, and then you invite the highest ranking dignitary, the mayor, city council member, to sit down and toss out the first QSO, much like tossing out the first ball at a ball game. And just let them get on the air, coach them through, have them do 2 or 3 QSOs, and then all the hoopla goes away. And what you will end up with in local media is a picture of that dignitary on the air saying, Mayor Smith is shown here talking to a ham in Texas via ham radio as part of the annual field day exercise. By the way, this year, I'm looking at the calendar here and doing the math in my head, this year will be the 82nd field day. Field day began in 1933.
That's great. I know here that the groups are involved with the local governments. In fact, they get proclamations, that this is ham radio day. So, and it gets in a newspaper, and so they are working that public relations side there.
It always great. And if somebody questions you on a technicality about the 82nd field day was suspended during World War II, so it's not it's 82 years old, but we missed 3 years or 4 years in there with the war. But regardless, it's been going on for a long time. A lot of people don't realize that, and that's another way to get some mileage out of it. Just say, hey, this is the 82nd year that field day's been held, and then people go, what? 82 years you've been doing this?
Well, I think I've got some radios almost 82 years old that still work, man. I mean, they're still ham radio gear,
Yeah. I got bones that feel like they're 82 years old that are barely working. So
you say something like, we've been doing this for 82 years and I can barely remember the first 2 years.
Yeah.
Is that how you tell people that this is an 82-year-old event?
I just like to just say there's a lot of deep history. I tell a lot of folks too that the technologies that we take for granted today, let's take cell phones for example. If you looked at our repeaters were primitive forms of cell phones, if you were, particularly if they were hooked up to auto patch, then we could say we were using a primitive version of cell phones in the 1960s. That's almost 50 years ago. Right?
Oh, yeah.
And we've been at the forefront, the vanguard of communications technology, and many of the technologies that the public uses today were either invented by or developed by or perfected by amateur radio operators. And that's part of that whole experimentation thing. Oh, by the way, it's not a shout out, but can I pass along some good news, because we got very serious there. And
sure.
Ted, we're at the bottom of the hour. Do I need to say that everyone on shortwave is listening to wtww in Lebanon, Tennessee, USA?
There you go. Okay.
All right.
Done.
I don't know if I need to say it or not. Okay.
Well, you can do it again if you want to in like a deeper voice,
Yeah, let's hear the deep voice. I'd like to. Let's hear it one more time.
Coming to you adjacent to Music City, USA, you are listening to WTWW, Lebanon, Tennessee, United States of America.
Ooh.
Oh man, I don't know about that. The voice was deep, but that accent, I don't know.
Oh, really? Coming to you and spanning the globe with information about amateur radio.
Well, Bill, I tell you, I've really enjoyed our talk tonight. I've started to notice people in the chat room. They're saying it's getting late in the East Coast. I know it's late for you. It's getting to be 10:30 there. We have another portion. We have another portion of the show here where we let people come into our show, and if they've got a Google Plus account, they can click on a link in our show here, and they actually come on the show. So we can take up to 10 people and put them on the show. So that's kind of fun. We kind of do that at the end. It's a very informal roundtable thing, and that's going to be our next portion or our next segment here. Ted, any final words on what Bill has said tonight?
No, I just think everybody needs to get behind this bill, right? Congressman, senator, or whatever we've got to do. What's the best route? Congressman, senator, both, or there's no bill in the Senate. Everybody remember Schoolhouse Rock? I'm just a bill up on Capitol Hill.
There is no U.S. Senate version of the bill right now. There does need to be one, but that's being worked on right now. So the only active bill is in the United States House of Representatives, which is what we euphemistically call Congress, and your congressman. So you just have to find out who and it's very easy. You just type into a search engine, who is my congressperson? Who's my congressman? And it will tell you who that person is. You just click on where it says contact us and say, please support H.R. 1301. That's all that you need to do.
Well, all right, we're gonna get that out, and the webcast tonight has been recorded. Hopefully, it'll be available tomorrow for people to see, and it'll go on our YouTube channel. So it's been a great interview, a great discussion. People will be watching this for many days to come.
Good. Thank you. Tom, thanks for including me tonight. Ted, glad you paired up with Tom. It's great what both of you do. My appreciation, both as an amateur radio operator on my own and from ARL, as an ARL official, I want to thank you for the chance to come on and spend some time with you. I'm very grateful.
Appreciate your company, and it's been very, very interesting. And I think it's important that all of us get behind this bill and support it, and get a hold of our representatives and say, hey, look, support this bill. Because, it's the future of our antennas, or as they used to say long ago, aerials,
That's right.
Aerials.
All righty. Well, 73.
Well, thank you.
Good night to everybody.
Yeah, and by the way, I'll leave you with a very corny joke, and that is, who are the two favorite relatives in a ham radio operator's family? Well, his antenna and his cousin and her daughter, Ariel.
Right. That's a good one. That's bad,
Tom. Don't humor me.
Oh,
all right,
no,
everyone have a good night.
Good.
It was really good to spend time with you.
Thank
have
you.
Have a good field day, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. All right. So, hey, that was a great interview there with Bill Morine N2COP, and we're here with our co-host Ted Randall WB8PUM, and we're going to go in just a moment to our roundtable hangout portion here, where you can join our webcast. But just want to say hello to all our listeners out there. I know we get a lot of shortwave listeners out there. Hopefully, we can bring some things to you guys that you like, that would be interesting to you. Drop us an email and give us some ideas of some of the things that we can do for you, that we can bring on the show. Send us some pictures of you watching if you'd like, and we'll put them on the webcast here. And that's how many of us got started in ham radio, is through shortwave listening. And by the way, the email address here is just Tom, that's T-O-M, Tom at w5kub.com. And just let us know what you'd like to see. Hey, be sure and check out the QSO radio show with Ted Randall on Saturdays. You can go to his website and see the schedule there. He's got several shows going on the weekend. We got Field Day coming up June 22nd, 7th through the 28th. Yeah. And we're not going to do anything live this year at the Field Day. It'd probably be a little boring at times, but there's always a lot of interesting things going on at certain times. So we plan on trying to record that on video, maybe do some editing, and then we will bring you Field Day maybe on the next Tuesday night show after Field Day. Ted, now you've already said you've done QSO radio show for Field Day. You're doing it again, right?
Oh yeah. This year we'll be announcing that over the QSO show, and then on the front end of the QSO website, which is qsoradioshow.com. Or you can just put my name in, tedrandall.com, and it'll take you there. And, it'll be a repeat of what we've done every year so far, and we've had a lot of fun each year hearing from all the different Field Day locations.
But even though it's the same, it's different, though, right? It's different every year.
There's different people that it gets bigger, every year.
Yeah.
But we hear from the same friends every year. And they've got different things to say, but it's just, I don't know. It's just really exciting listening to and hearing all these people. A lot of people take a cell phone and they pass it around to their group members, and they talk about what they're doing and whatnot. I don't know. it's just cool. It's field day is what it is.
Well, it's going to be a lot of fun. I just hope the weather hangs out this year. We're due a good weather here. Your area may have been okay last year, but we had some pretty tough weather last year. But it can't be like that every time, so we're looking forward to it. I'd just like to say thanks for myself and Ted Randall for tuning in tonight on shortwave and also on the w5kub.com webcast. And we really appreciate you guys out there. We're going to go to the roundtable portion of our show now, and I think probably, Ted, you can go ahead and change your programming on shortwave, because what's coming up next is not just good for viewer listening.
All right, good night, 73.
All right.
By the way,
yeah,
I discovered something, and I wanted to pass this along. I've heard so many people on ham radio chew another ham out when he says 73s. They'll say, no, it's 73. But you know what I found out, and that is Hiram Percy Maxim. You know who he is.
Oh, yeah, he's the main man.
Yeah, used to sign much of his documents and writings of the old man. He used to sign them 73s.
Yeah, apostrophe S, didn't he? Yeah, I remember.
Yeah, so the next time somebody tells you that, say, hey, wait a minute. Let's just go by what the old man did, okay?
Yeah,
Good night, and we'll talk to you later at 73s.
All right, thanks very much, Ted, for being with us. We really appreciate it. All right, guys, we're going to go to the roundtable part now. We've got a new system we just put in this week, and I don't know if I have anything to put on here for you to look at while I'm trying to get on. Let's see. We can, well, I don't know what I can put on here for you. Here's a picture of field day. We'll put that on there for a few minutes and let you just look at that. Don't go away. I mean, there's more to come. We'll be on here in a minute, and we'll hopefully bring some video into the show from our guest out there. So it'll just take me a minute to get the other system on here and get the video links established.